bringing Jay Bilas, the former Dookie, of course, working for the mothership as their basketball analyst. But before we get to Grayson Allen, Jay, we just had the Greek freak pronunciation game and didn't know if you would want to jump in on that.
Geez, it took me 4 years to handle Krzyzewski. I don't know if I could do what it'd be. Giannis Antetokounmpo. Is that right?
Did you say Giannis or Giannis?
I said Giannis.
Okay. And you did a bow, not a po.
I did a bow.
Okay. Yeah, I think Bilas. I think Bilas is probably the leader in the clubhouse here.
Strong entry right there.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
but I think this is like finding a ball, a golf ball in the woods. It's the substantially similar rule. As long as it's close enough, I think it works.
And while Jason Kidd came on a couple of weeks ago, he said he didn't even know how to pronounce his last name.
Yeah, well, coaches. I mean, this. Coaches are horrible at pronunciation. So if you ask a coach, hey, how do you pronounce this guy's name? They'll tell you, oh, it's like this, and then the SID comes up later and says, no, that's not what it is.
Or they'll go,
that's not even close.
He says he calls him GA, or he just calls him by his number, but he doesn't call him, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Because he doesn't have to.
How could you even get through all that? Even if you could pronounce it correctly, why would you go to those lengths?
No need to.
Yeah, I couldn't even go. That's why it's Coach K. I mean, why would you go through the Krzyzewski, all all that pronunciation problem and all those syllables if you can just say K?
I was surprised last night when I tuned into the game. I didn't tune in at the beginning of Duke, but I wanted to see if Grayson Allen was on the bench in a suit and tie. Where would he be during the game? And then all of a sudden I tune in and I see him in uniform. How surprised were you? Obviously you got a heads up, but how surprised were you that he was back after one game?
You know what? I didn't get much of a heads up, Dan. I came from the Wisconsin-Indiana game, so I didn't get there to be able to see practice or anything. But when I saw him in warm-ups, dressed the same as every other player, like a lot of times 2 hours before a game, I get there about 2 hours before, and a lot of times you'll see guys going through individual work with a coach or a couple of coaches. But then, Grayson Allen did that, but that wasn't any indication. When he came out with the rest of the team, he was dressed like everybody else in his regular warm-up gear. Then I knew, okay, he's going to play. But we didn't find out he was going to start until we got the official starters like you would 15, 20 minutes before the game.
So he sits out one game. And, just to give you my opinion, earlier in the show, I said that it feels like we want justice as sports fans. And I said, look, if Coach K, he's the one that has to dole this out. Whether I like it or not, it's his house, his family, his team, his player. And I think there's more going on behind the scenes than we'll ever know. So it's one game. I think losing the captaincy is pretty humbling and embarrassing for him. Your thoughts on a one-game suspension?
Dan, this one's kind of stumped me, honestly. This is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in basketball, not just college basketball, but basketball. I've never come across this kind of thing where it's, a guy intentionally trips somebody and does it 3 times within 5 months or whatever the time frame was. It's weird. And, it's kind of like it's unsportsmanlike or conduct unbecoming. You don't even know how to categorize it because it's so weird. And so when it happened the second time, I was one of those that said when Coach K didn't suspend him, there was a lot of hand-wringing over he needs to be suspended, taught a lesson, all this other stuff. And my thing was, okay, well, how many games then? Zero seemed to be reasonable with me. He got this reprimand from the league. The league didn't do anything about it. The officials didn't do anything about it in the game. So I was okay with that. The third one, I kind of thought, okay, now you got to suspend him. You got to do something. But I was wondering to myself, well, is it because of me or is it because it's the right thing to do for the kid or for the school? Because the public opinion is important in this, I think. And so I felt like the best thing to do for Duke would be suspend the kid so that the kid could move on. And if, otherwise we're going to have this constant discussion about it and the kid wouldn't be able to get out from under it. Mm-hmm. Because this is just my personal opinion, Dan. I don't think this is some sort of rational thought where you can say, okay, now he's learned his lesson. Because if after all the storm of criticism that came to him after the second one and all that came with that, and it was not pleasant for any of them, he would do it again means, I don't think he had necessarily control over it. And I'm not saying like some Duke, it's a question of what's reasonable, because I'm not saying some Duke fans will say it was some involuntary leg spasm. I don't agree with that. But then, you go outside the walls of the Gothic Wonderland, and there's some unreasonable people there too that think he should be incarcerated, or get a 10-game suspension, or not play till a tournament, or all these things we've heard. Mine is it reasonable? I happen to think that the way it was handled was within the bounds of reason. I probably would have gone a little bit longer, but the fact that Coach K is getting surgery on Friday, I do think, I don't know how much it factored in, but it clearly factored in bringing him back now. And it certainly took a lot off of the plate of Jeff Capel and the staff and the university and having to do something while Coach K had stepped away.
I just wonder the ACC's role in this, Jay, and if we make this, player X for the Miami Hurricanes, and he's had 3 different incidents here, is it handled differently by the ACC as opposed to leaving it up to Coach K?
See, I don't think it would be handled differently by the league. I think the league gets involved. They consult with the schools. The league doesn't want to do any of this stuff. They don't want to be in the business of handing down punishments and reprimands and all this stuff. They don't want to do that. I think what you do, or at least what I do, is you look at, okay, what have they done in other cases? Now, there's no case like this one. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean to say egregious or how horrifying it was or all that. This one's just weird. I mean, it's just, I don't know what other word to use for it. It's odd. But if the league starts getting into that, it starts becoming, then they start becoming the arbiter of all punishments for things like that. So, first it starts with the officials, then it goes to the school, and then the league gets involved. Do I think that the league looks a little bit wimpy in this? Yeah, a little bit. Mm-hmm. But then you get to a public perception issue. I mean, the kid got suspended. We get our say. Like, one thing I do not listen to, and that's when any idea that would come from Duke or any other school that is being criticized, is that we should keep our mouths shut. It's none of our business. Because if we are, or we're not qualified. Because if we're qualified to praise, we are qualified to criticize. Because nobody's ever called me, and I'm sure nobody's ever called you and say, hey, listen, you are not qualified to heap this much praise on us. Keep your mouth shut. I've had enough. So when we're critical, we're reasonable people, and our criticism is reasoned. They may not agree with it. It may not be right to them, but it's reasonable.
Jay Bilas from the Mothership joining us. Are you pro or anti-court storming?
I really don't care, but I do think it is, somebody's going to get hurt, and there is a dangerous aspect to it. It is not part of the game. It's become part of the atmosphere. I do believe we in television are a little bit to blame, because the court stormings end every highlight of an upset, and it makes it look like a something that should be done. Like, we don't show people who run onto the field during a game anymore. We used to, but we don't. And that's been a long-standing policy now for a number of years. But the reason we don't is because we don't want to encourage it. So our showing it means we're kind of encouraging it. I don't think it's part of the game, but it is part of the atmosphere around the game, and it's part of how we sell the game. But, when somebody gets hurt, then they're going to do something about it. It's kind of like, you remember when people used to rip down the goalposts?
Yeah.
People got hurt doing that,
yep.
And it got expensive too. But now they're fining teams that do it. Like, Butler's going to get fined by the Horizon League, not the Horizon League, the Big East. They're going to get fined by the Big East. And those kind of things, I'm not sure that works or even matters. That you're dealing with the university students and how they handle security and all that stuff with their own students. I don't know that's worthy of a fine. But that's another thing we're getting into, where we're judge and jury on whether how a conference should act.
I'll leave you with this. How many teams do you think can win the championship this year?
I would have said 8 or 9 earlier in the year, but I don't know that the top teams are as strong as I thought they'd be. They're all really strong in certain areas, but they've got a couple areas where you go, boy, they're not as strong as I thought they'd be in this area. They don't defend as well, or they don't guard the post as well, they don't rebound, stuff like that. I do think that if Duke gets everybody healthy and in some kind of rhythm, they've got the best sort of roster. But Villanova's got the tightest group. UCLA is the best offensive team. Kentucky's the one that scares me, or that would scare me if I had to play against them, because their guards are so good. They just don't shoot it. That's the only thing they don't do. But they do everything else, and they could be. And then West Virginia scares me because of the way they the way they can be disruptive defensively. It's going to be fun toward the end because there are a lot of legit teams that are really good, but there's nobody that is head and shoulders just yet.
Thank you, Jay. Always great to talk to you.
Pleasure is mine, Dan. Great to be with you, buddy.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.